Harold Kozinski sat in his creaky fishing chair, adjusting his reading glasses as he peered at the star chart spread across his lap. At 78, Hal had seen better days. His back ached, his knees creaked like old floorboards, and he couldn't remember where he'd put his coffee half the time. But the fishing out here near the Horsehead Nebula was spectacular, even if the local wildlife happened to be more tentacled than he preferred. "Now, where did I put that quantum bait?" he muttered, shuffling through tackle boxes that looked older than most civilizations. That's when the Zephyrian Empire decided to crash his peaceful retirement. The dreadnought materialized out of hyperspace with all the subtlety of a freight train through a library. Metal and chrome, bristling with weapons that could crack planets, it dwarfed Hal's rusty little vessel like a whale next to a minnow. Warning lights flashed across his dashboard, which was held together with duct tape and hope. "Well, butter my biscuit," Hal said, squinting at the massive ship. "That's new." Commander Vextar materialized on his view screen, all 7 feet of scaled purple arrogance. His yellow eyes gleamed with the kind of superiority complex that made dictators everywhere proud. 4 arms crossed over his chest, each one ending in claws that could probably open cans quite efficiently. "Primitive human vessel. You will surrender immediately. Resistance is futile and frankly embarrassing." Hal blinked slowly, the way old people do when processing new information. "Oh my. Are you folks lost? I don't have much in the way of directions, but I think the interstate's back that way somewhere." Vextar's scales rippled with what might have been amusement. "Behold, the mighty human race. Confused, decrepit, and operating technology that belongs in a museum." "Hey now," Hal protested mildly, "this baby's got character. She's been good to me for 30 years. Well, 37 if you count the time she broke down in the Vega system and I had to hitchhike home." The tractor beam that seized his ship was surprisingly gentle. Hal appreciated that. At his age, sudden movements played hell with his arthritis. As his vessel was drawn into the dreadnought's hangar, Hal caught sight of the ship's name emblazoned on the hull, the inevitable conquest. Someone had a serious case of overcompensation. He'd seen the same thing in younger officers back in the day, always trying to prove something with fancy titles and bigger guns. The hangar was impressive. He'd give them that, a rows of sleek fighters. Enough firepower for a small war, and more aliens than a Star Trek convention. They all stopped what they were doing to stare at the pathetic human ship being dragged in like roadkill. Hal waved cheerfully through his viewport. A few aliens actually waved back before catching themselves. The containment cell was actually quite comfortable, all things considered. Clean, well lit, with a bench that didn't aggravate his lower back too much. Hal had been in worse places, though he wasn't about to tell his captors that. "Oh dear," he said to the force field humming in front of him. "I don't suppose you folks have a restroom nearby. At my age, you know how it is." Security Chief Blorg stomped over, all 9 feet of muscle and bad attitude. He looked like someone had crossed a rhinoceros with a particularly grumpy bouncer. His voice rumbled like an avalanche with anger management issues. "Silence, pathetic meat creature. You will speak only when Commander Vextar permits it." "Well, that's not very neighborly," Hal replied, adjusting his cardigan. "Back home we always offer visitors some coffee and cookies. Chocolate chip, usually. Do you folks like chocolate chip? Though I suppose with all those teeth, sugar might be a problem." Science Officer Klix materialized next to Blorg, her insectoid features twitching with what might have been scientific curiosity. She resembled a praying mantis that had been to college and wouldn't let you forget it. Her compound eyes reflected the cell's lighting like tiny disco balls. "Fascinating," she chittered, consulting her datapad. "The human lifespan averages merely 75 years. This specimen is already beyond its expiration date." "Hey now," Hal protested. "I've got plenty of good years left. Just last week I helped my neighbor fix his hover mower. Well, I supervised mostly. And held the flashlight." Commander Vextar arrived with his usual dramatic flair, cape swirling like he was auditioning for a space opera. "Behold, the terror of Earth. A geriatric fool who probably gets lost trying to find his own kitchen." The assembled aliens laughed appreciatively. Nothing like a good old-fashioned human mockery session to boost morale. Actually, I found the kitchen just fine this morning, Hal said helpfully. Made some lovely pancakes. Though I did accidentally put salt in the batter instead of sugar. At my age, the containers all looked the same. Vextar activated the ship's communication system with theatrical flourish. Citizens of the Zephyrian Empire. Behold the pinnacle of human evolution. The camera focused on Hal, who gave a little wave. This decrepit specimen represents the greatest threat their species can muster. Across the Empire, millions of aliens had a good chuckle. Poor humans, they thought. So weak, so pathetic, so utterly harmless. Hal noticed details, though. The security protocols, the weapon configurations, the crew rotations, raising what people would discuss in front of someone they considered completely harmless. It was like being invisible, only with better conversation. "I don't suppose you folks have any prune juice?" he asked during a lull in the mockery. "Keeps me regular, you know. At my age, fiber is very important." The aliens exchanged glances. This was their feared enemy. This rambling old man worried about his digestive health. Commander Vextar settled into his interrogation chair with the confidence of someone who'd never met real resistance. The room was designed to intimidate: harsh lighting, uncomfortable seating, and enough surveillance equipment to make paranoids everywhere feel validated. "Now then, aged human," Vextar began, all four arms gesturing dramatically, "you will tell us everything about Earth's military capabilities." Hal squinted at him through his glasses. "Military? Oh my, I wouldn't know about that sort of thing. I'm retired, you see. Spent my whole career in sanitation management." Sanitation management? Clix's antennae twitched with confusion. "Garbage," Hal explained helpfully. "Though we preferred waste redistribution specialist. Sounds more professional, don't you think?" Blorg slammed a massive fist on the table, which was probably supposed to be intimidating but mostly just made Hal's water glass rattle. "Guys, all humans are warriors. You must know of their secret weapons." "Secret weapons?" Hal chuckled. "Son, the most dangerous thing I own is my wife's cooking. God rest her soul. Martha could burn water, nearly took out the whole neighborhood once trying to make toast." The interrogation continued for hours. They asked about Earth's fleet strength, defensive positions, military leadership. Hal answered with stories about his grandson's Little League games, his arthritis medication, and a fascinating documentary he'd watched about penguins. Admiral Krextus appeared via hologram, his presence commanding even through the flickering projection. Unlike his subordinates, Krextus had the bearing of someone who'd actually won wars. His scarred hide and missing eye spoke of real combat experience. "This is your prisoner?" Krextus asked, his voice carrying the weight of disappointment. "Yes, Admiral." Vextar practically vibrated with pride, a perfect example of human weakness. Krextus studied Hal with his remaining eye. Something flickered there, a moment of uncertainty that his subordinates missed entirely. "We've analyzed their homeworld," Vex-2's continued. "Primitive satellites, minimal space presence, no significant military installations. They'll make excellent servants once we've conquered them." "Servants?" Hal looked genuinely puzzled. "Well, that's awfully presumptuous. Most folks like to be asked first." The aliens laughed again. Such naivety, such childlike innocence. How could such a weak species have ever survived this long? But Admiral Krextus wasn't laughing. He'd fought too many wars, conquered too many worlds. Something about this old human felt wrong, like a weapon disguised as a walking stick. "Show him the fleet," Krextus ordered. The holographic display filled the room with images of the Zephyrian Armada. Thousands of ships, enough firepower to sterilize solar systems, all preparing for the glorious conquest of humanity. Al whistled softly. "Well, that's quite impressive, though I hope you're not planning anything unfriendly. My grandchildren live on Earth, you know. Little Timmy just learned to ride his bike without training wheels." The alien celebration was reaching fever pitch. They'd shown Hal their scout reports, their invasion timelines, their plans for humanity's subjugation. The old man just sat there, nodding politely like someone discussing weekend barbecue plans. Your scout fleets departed this morning, Vextar announced with theatrical glee. By tomorrow, they'll have mapped every defense Earth possesses, which, according to our analysis, amounts to approximately nothing. Hal shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Scout fleets. That sounds rather aggressive. Aggressive? Blorg laughed, the sound like boulders tumbling down a mountain. Human, we are the Zephyrian Empire. We have conquered 17 systems. Your pitiful world will become our newest agricultural colony. Agricultural colony? Hal's voice carried a note of concern for the first time. What about the people living there? Klix consulted her datapad with scientific detachment. Optimal scenarios project 70% survival rates among the useful breeding stock. The elderly will be disposed of immediately, naturally. No point feeding useless mouths. Something shifted in the room's atmosphere, subtle as a change in air pressure before a storm. The elderly? Hal asked quietly. Obviously, Vextar said, warming to his subject. Ancient humans like yourself serve no purpose. Though perhaps we'll keep a few as curiosities, entertainment for our young ones. Watching decrepit humans shuffle around might amuse them. Hal's hands folded carefully in his lap. And the children? Bred for servitude from birth, Klix explained clinically. Proper conditioning will eliminate their natural human weakness. Your grandson, for instance, would make an acceptable maintenance worker once properly trained. Little Timmy, Hal said softly. Yes, your precious grandchildren will serve the Empire well. Vextar continued, oblivious to the change in his prisoner. Of course we'll need to cull the weaker specimens. Can't have defective stock contaminating the breeding pools. The silence stretched like a held breath. Then Hal stood up. It wasn't the slow, careful rising of an elderly man favoring arthritic joints. It was the fluid motion of someone who'd spent decades commanding respect through presence alone. His back straightened, his shoulders squared, and suddenly the containment cell seemed too small to hold him. You want war? Hal's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but it carried more menace than all of Blorg's roaring. Then war you shall have. The aliens laughed nervously. This had to be some pathetic human attempt at intimidation. Look at him. This decrepit old fool trying to seem threatening. But Admiral Krex Two's, watching through the hologram, felt something cold settle in his stomach. He'd heard that tone before, from the mouths of enemies who'd made him bleed. Hal sat back down, but he didn't slump. The doddering grandfather was gone, replaced by something harder, colder, infinitely more dangerous.
You know, Hal said conversationally, I really was just out fishing. Computer, Hal said calmly, authorization Kozinski Alpha 77 Tango. Every screen in the interrogation room flickered to life. The aliens spun around in confusion as data streams cascaded across displays that moments before had been under their complete control. What sorcery is this? Vextar demanded, though his voice carried less certainty than before. Hal removed his reading glasses and cleaned them carefully. Oh, not sorcery, just good old-fashioned human ingenuity. You see, gentlemen, I haven't been entirely honest with you. The ship's lights dimmed, then shifted to a softer hue. Somehow, the containment field around Hal's cell had vanished without anyone noticing. My name is Harold Kozinski, he continued, standing with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to command. Admiral Harold Kozinski retired, though apparently not as retired as I'd hoped. Klix's compound eyes went wide. Impossible. Our intelligence reports show no human named. Intelligence reports, Hal chuckled, but there was no warmth in it now. You know what's funny about intelligence? It only works if you're actually intelligent enough to interpret it correctly.
The ship shuddered. Then again, warning lights began flashing throughout the corridor.
You see those fishing trips I mentioned? Well, I suppose they were a kind of fishing. I was fishing for information about who might be thinking of visiting Earth uninvited. Imagine my surprise when I hooked you folks. Admiral Krex Two's materialized fully in the hologram, his scarred face grim. Vextar, retreat immediately. This is a trap. A trap? Vextar sputtered. Admiral, this is one geriatric human. He's probably having a senile episode. That's when the first explosion rocked the ship. On the main display, the Zephyrian scout fleet appeared, or rather what was left of it. Ship after ship winked out of existence, destroyed by weapons that hadn't been there moments before. Those primitive satellites you mentioned, Hal said conversationally, turn out to be remarkably good at their jobs. We've been watching your empire for quite some time, taking notes, making preparations. You know how it is with us old folks, we like to plan ahead. The ship's computer spoke in a pleasant female voice that definitely wasn't Zephyrian. Admiral Kozinski, all systems are now under Terran control. Shall I disable their weapons array? If you would, Sarah. And perhaps unlock the armory. I suspect our guests might want to surrender shortly. More explosions lit up the view screen. The mighty Zephyrian invasion fleet was being systematically dismantled by forces they couldn't even see. Impossible, Blorg rumbled, but uncertainty crept into his voice. Humans are weak, defenseless. Are we? Hal asked mildly. You know, that's the funny thing about appearances. My old fishing boat out there, she's got more processing power than your flagship's computer. Those creaky joints I was complaining about, cybernetic enhancements, comes in handy when you need to interface directly with complex systems. He gestured, and the interrogation room's displays showed Earth's true face. Orbital defense platforms that could crack moons, fleets that had been hiding in plain sight as asteroid mining operations, space elevators that were actually rail guns capable of hurling projectiles at significant percentages of light speed. The thing about humans, Hal continued, is that we're really, really good at looking harmless right up until we decide not to be. The Zephyrian Empire's mighty armada lasted exactly 47 minutes against humanity's true military might. It would have been shorter, but the humans wanted to test some new weapons systems, and you don't get opportunities like this every day. Commander Vextar found himself sitting in what had been his own interrogation chair, staring in shell-shocked disbelief at the displays showing his empire's forces being systematically obliterated. Admiral Krextus had managed to escape with perhaps 3% of the invasion fleet, a tactical retreat that probably saved his species from complete extinction. I don't understand, Vextar mumbled. Our intelligence was perfect. Humans are primitive, weak, harmless. Hal poured himself a cup of coffee from the interrogation room's newly installed refreshment station. Sarah had been busy with renovations. Oh, we are harmless, Hal agreed cheerfully. Right up until you threaten our grandchildren. Then we get downright unreasonable about things. Blorg, now secured in the containment field that had previously held Hal, shook his massive head. But the deception. The acting. How did you maintain such a performance? Acting. Hal looked genuinely puzzled. Son, I wasn't acting. I really am 78 years old. I really do have arthritis. I really was just out fishing when you folks decided to interrupt my retirement. He sipped his coffee thoughtfully. The thing is, being old and being harmless aren't the same thing. You'd think a species that conquers galaxies would know the difference. Clix's scientific mind was struggling with the implications. But your technology appeared primitive. Your space presence minimal. Camouflage, Hal explained patiently. We learned a long time ago that looking dangerous just attracts the wrong sort of attention. Better to appear weak and insignificant while you're actually building the kind of defenses that make entire armadas think twice about dropping by uninvited. On the main display, Earth's moon opened like a flower, revealing weapon emplacements that could sterilize solar systems. Jupiter's largest moons began moving under their own power, shedding their rocky disguises to reveal mobile battle platforms. The asteroid belt restructured itself into a defensive grid that made the Magellan line look like a picket fence. Every retirement colony in human space just activated their defensive systems, Hal noted, checking his data pad. Turns out all those old folks you're planning to dispose of are mostly retired military personnel. We have very generous pension plans. Vextar's remaining pride made one last desperate stand. You cannot have defeated the entire empire. We are vast. Powerful. We're vast, Hal corrected gently. Past tense. As of about 10 minutes ago, the Zephyrian Empire officially surrendered to the Terran Federation. Admiral Krextus seems like a reasonable fellow, much more sensible than his subordinates. He offered the dejected aliens a plate of cookies that had appeared from somewhere. Chocolate chip. Made them myself this morning before you folks showed up. Recipe's been in my family for generations. Blorg stared at the cookies like they might explode. What happens to us now? Well, Um, Hal said, settling back into his chair with the satisfied air of someone whose fishing trip had exceeded all expectations. I suppose that depends on how quickly you learn to play nice with others. The Federation has excellent rehabilitation programs, very humane. We even have recreational activities. He stood up, stretching joints that probably weren't as arthritic as they appeared. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get back to my fishing. The bass are biting something fierce out there, and I'd hate to miss the evening feeding frenzy. As Hal shuffled toward the door, Vextar called out desperately, wait, how? How did we miss this? How did we not see? Hal paused at the threshold, adjusting his cardigan. Son, the secret to a long and peaceful retirement is making sure nobody realizes you're dangerous until it's far too late to do anything about it. He disappeared around the corner, leaving behind the sound of his whistling and the faint aroma of chocolate chip cookies. In the depths of space, an old man's fishing boat puttered quietly toward a nebula where the fishing was always good, and the neighbors knew better than to disturb a retiree's well-earned peace.